now we're going to geek out a bit, okay? And we're just going to talk about some of there's lots of information about high dynamic range, PQ or 2084, hybrid log gamma, and there's a number of, there'll be a lot of people watching this thinking, which way do I go, what's the difference, etc. And so you're the man on that. I always come to you because you seem to be on top of all those issues.
Try you.
So we're not going to tell you exactly what's going to happen here. We're just going to probably go over what people are talking about and the issues that they see around those images. Exactly how they all work out, we don't know. But I like to, on my podcasts, to keep you informed. So you have an idea when you're looking at these, or when you come to talk to Bram and you're going to buy a monitor, what questions to ask to know that you're getting the right product for you. Yeah. And that's why I always put forward informed decisions. So we're going to put a lot of information out there. You take it the way you want, but think yourself informed and you'll make a better decision. So let's get into that.
All right.
Now we've got ST.2084.
Yeah.
Everyone's pretty much running down that track because it's standardized.
Absolutely.
And it's quite, everyone sort of understands it now because they've had some time with it.
Absolutely.
But we've also got this new hybrid log gamma system coming along. Now they're very different and they have different advantages and disadvantages.
Absolutely.
So I want you, because you eloquently described it to me before, but for people watching, what's the main difference why you would want to go down a hybrid log gamma over a PQ curve?
Yeah, so hybrid log gamma, in theory, what it allows us to do is do one master grade, in theory at the higher nit level, true HDR grade, and then have a single pipeline for the signal to go to all devices at all luminance levels without special metadata, without requiring complex new devices or set-top boxes or anything like that. You can do it over existing infrastructure, send the signal, and you get a kind of good, better, best scenario where on SDR it will look okay, on a 500 or 800 nit TV it's going to look even better, and then when you have a true HDR capable display, 1000 nit or more, it's going to look spectacular and very close to the original grade. It's attractive, I think, from a business perspective for content providers and for content creators because you're not having to do multiple grades. Now that being said, we had the discussion earlier.
And I'll go over that discussion too. As you know, I've got so many videos this year, and one of the things that I picked up from watching, for example, Pixar and other high-end facilities and high-end production companies making this content is that a lot of the times they decide to do different editorial decisions on their high dynamic range master compared to the 48 nit theatrical release master. Now what does that mean? It means they completely changed the way they treated the color in one grade to the other because they thought it enhanced the experience or was able to bring a new emotional impact to the story. Now that's great, and I saw some demos of this. Inside Out was a very big example of that demo, of how they use the memory balls, etc., and they use them differently in the high dynamic range master. And that's great for a company like Pixar who can afford to go back and remaster things again and again, but really the rest of the world is probably not, they're like the 1%. And the rest of the world is probably more likely wants to go to one master for all distributables. Yeah. So that's both sides of the argument.
Absolutely.
I can understand and I agree with both sides of the argument, but which way it falls in terms of what the industry does or what is yet to be known.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And to a degree, I would sort of hope to think that we'd probably do something which will be a compromise where we can do both. Because the big guys, I agree with them, sometimes you can bring an emotional impact or use that as part of the art form of making cinema. Yeah. And that's the big issue is going forward, especially with all this technology getting in the way of actually the art form. Yeah. I'm a big believer, and that's what ASUS, and I've been a big pushing SMPTE a lot lately because SMPTE is about standardization of our workflows and technical structures so we can move all that effort on that out of the way and let the creative fill that big spot that's left.
Yeah. And then that's another big challenge with HDR is you start getting into, we have all these displays at different luminance levels, and we have different ways to try to address that. But you do get these concerns from content creators of, am I really getting my vision across to the end users with so many different types of displays out there? And with SDR, you kind of had a similar scenario, which is like, hey, did the end user calibrate their TV correctly? Is it in the showroom mode? But at least in theory, if you were a video file and you cared about seeing, what you graded correctly, then I could go to my home TV, I could calibrate it, I could get it correct to D65, Rec 709, and if I did a reasonably good job of that, I would see what the content creator had intended. With HDR, a lot of what we're doing now, a lot of what the work of these companies are involved in this is how do we maintain that? How do we use metadata, or how do we use specific EOTFs to try to keep that going? Because that's a huge challenge right now.
When all the monitors are coming out with different peak luminance levels, it's very, very difficult.
Yeah, and it feels different. I mean, when you view that content, and I've seen it with different metadata applied, I've seen HLG type workflows, and those things are what I would call effective, but to say that there's no difference is it's not correct. There's definitely a difference when you view it on these different luminance levels, and in theory you hope for something that's as simple as a good, better, best sort of scenario. But what we see today and what's trying to be addressed by a lot of these companies is the fact that a lot of times it's not just a good, better, best, but it's hey, what we were trying to get across didn't get across because of these huge differences. So.
Now, I just want to visit, because I want you to go through this with me.
Yeah.
Now, why is... Sorry. That's fine. PQ, and how PQ works. PQ is basically, it's not a gamma, it's more EOTF, and it's based around the perceptual vision, or what our eyes see, and that's why they map that out, what our eye sees compared to the luminance levels and the data that we see, and that came up with this curve called the PQ curve. They mapped it up to 10,000 nits, and they set that curve solid to 10,000 nits. It doesn't change no matter what brightness the monitor is. So this is something that a lot of people don't seem to understand, right?
Yeah.
And that's so even though you're using different luminance on monitors, you're still using the same curve. And this is why, when you were talking about before a 350, when it's only using 350 out of 10,000, the PQ curve doesn't really work very well because it's using such a small portion of that curve.
Because your specific bit levels, so to speak, are locked to a certain luminance level.
That's right.
And so the lower your luminance, the fewer bits you're using in a sense.
That's right. And I want people to understand that, because if you understand that premise, it gives you a better understanding how the PQ curve actually works at different luminances, and how the brighter you go, and how that extrapolates to how the picture will be improved.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I want to put that out there. So it's all the stuff that's going around, that's a very important stuff to understand.
And the easiest way for that to kind of hit home for a colorist, I think, is because we've gotten this question a lot already, is you use something like Resolve, for example, and you set an HDR 300 nit output, and everybody's like, well, why is everything peaking out around 50 IRE? It's like, well, that's what you got.
That's exactly that's all you got. That's right. Now the hybrid log gamma, from my understanding, it's a combination of the good old gamma curve and another high luminance curve at the top end to take care of that. But the interesting part of the hybrid log gamma, and we were discussing it before, is that it tries to take into consideration not the ambient light. That's incorrect.
Surround lighting, I think, is the preferred term.
That's right.
If I understand it correctly. And system gamma is ultimately the concern. What is your total end-to-end system gamma? And it's clever because that surround lighting does have an effect on how you perceive quantization or banding type issues, which is ultimately also what PQ is trying to address. Is, at a 10,000 nit, you can't use something like a 2.4 gamma curve with just 10 bits of data, or 8 bits of data would be terrible. So that's why these curves exist, because we're trying to optimize things, like you said, for the human visual system. And hybrid log gamma is interesting in that it seems to be quite aware of, so I don't know that's the right way to say it, the standard's aware of something, but the creators of the standard are aware that has a big impact.
That's right. Now, because very interesting, because you say people, when they think of hybrid log gamma, and it's supposed to take away the surrounding light, Now, what does that mean? Does that mean the actual ambient light in the room? Actually, no, it doesn't.
Yeah, from my understanding, I mean, because I was having conversations with people about this, and I kept using the term ambient.
That's right.
And they're like, no, surround.
So I sort of explained it to you, and you said that's probably right. Is that when you look at a screen, you look at the screen, and you also see everything around the screen.
Exactly.
And so everything around the screen and how bright that is to your eye actually affects how your eye will work when it's looking that direction. So if it's very bright around the screen, your eye will naturally, it will dilate suitable for that area, for that brightness. But if it's everything dark around the screen, there'll be a different amount of light coming into your eye, so it will dilate for that suitable light level. So what's the suitable light level for the screen for your eye? Yeah. And that's what the hybrid log gamma is trying to address. Yeah. And that's very interesting. How it actually does that, me and Bram are sort of going, not really sure.
Well, it's interesting because, the question that I had when I first heard of this is I was like, well, are we going to have to measure this? And
yeah, that's right.
I think that there's still, and again, I'm not a total expert on these things, but my understanding is there's a lot of testing going on to find out how much of a difference this really makes. And there may be kind of this nice range where, within a certain range it doesn't matter, and we can use this one sort of end-to-end curve and it will just work. But it is interesting that they're thinking about it, because it is something that, in fact, needs to be taken into consideration if you really want to optimize the signal path for this, kind of perceptual ability to see quantization or banding. So, yeah.
Well, that's all very good. Fantastic discussion again, Bram.
Thank
Always
you.
very enjoyable. So I hope everyone out there, it's just like HDR 101 here. We're all getting understanding and on a new path. And again, I'll say it again and again, and I think Bram would agree. When you are going to go to HDR, and you most likely will within the next year, or very much pressured to do so, I really suggest that you go get some sort of HDR monitor.
Yeah.
Hopefully, Bram will be able to supply that. But you spend 3 to 6 months practicing before you even attempt to call yourself a HDR grader. It is a new language. I've spoken to a number of people who are doing it today, and it very much doesn't just affect you. You'll be going back to your cameraman, etc., and so you sort of really need to light differently now, here and here, and you need to go through it, learn, see how that works, go back to the people you work with them. You have full circle, everyone has to get into the game and learn all this together, so we can actually optimize and make sure what we're capturing and what we can get to the screen takes full advantage of this new HDR world.
Yeah, and with things being in flux so much, in a year we might be having completely different discussion, and everything might have changed.
I'm sure the whole hybrid log gamma discussion will be very different next year, because it's still very early for the hybrid log gamma, so take everything we say with a grain of salt at this stage.
I might be completely wrong 6 months from now.
That's right. All right then, thank you, Bram.
No worries.
Always very enjoyable.
Pleasure.
And I'll catch you around next time.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is James Garden at FSI at NAB 2016. Bye for now.